following broadcast is a special presentation of the public radio and television stations of Alaska.
Good evening and welcome to a live broadcast of Governor Steve Cooper's final State of the State address to a joint session of the 16th Alaska Legislature. I'm Janine Pohl and I'm here in Juneau with the Alaska Public Radio Network's Peter Kenyon as we wait for Governor Cooper to enter the chambers. A little bit of House and Senate joint business before we get going. And we'll be waiting to find out what the governor has to say on the State of the State, as well as waiting Thursday night for the governor's State of the Budget address, which will be delivered at 7 o'clock as well. Peter, tonight are we going to be finding out what the governor hopes to accomplish in the next year? Will we be hearing a reiteration of his past accomplishments, maybe a little bit of both?
Well, I think the question on most legislators' mind right now is, what does Steve Cooper have on his mind besides the education endowment?
I'm sure a lot of people are asking that.
In his first 3 years, his speeches, State of the State addresses often resembled crisis mode kinds of addresses. He tried to shake the legislature up, hit them with things that they don't normally like to talk about. Taxes, campaign finance reform, a lot of difficult
large
subjects.
Budget reductions.
Yeah, very large budget reductions. This year we had certainly plenty of crises or major events, but the advance word from the governor's office is that we'll have a different kind of speech from Steve Cooper tonight, a little bit lighter, more upbeat, without the big laundry list of unpleasant topics. It is certain, though, that he will be talking about his education endowment, his plan to use permanent fund earnings to pay for public education in the future. If Jay Hammond wants to be remembered for the permanent fund, Steve Cooper certainly wants his name linked with the education endowment. And that message will be targeted at the Senate because his bill passed the House last year. That would put it on the ballot next November.
That's right. We're waiting right now for a representative from the House and Senate to go and collect the governor, and we'll be starting shortly for the governor's State of the State address. If you're watching on television, we're looking out the hall waiting for him to come in. The governor's office did say that there would not be surprises tonight, although he was doing some revising of his speech until just a couple of hours before now. Governor Steve Cooper entering the House chambers, shaking hands, coming up and greeting the Senate President and House Speaker, and he will be beginning shortly.
President Kelly, Speaker Cotton, members of the legislature, members of the cabinet, special guests, fellow Alaskans. I'd like to welcome all of you to the final session of the 16th Alaska State Legislature. As we begin this session, we say thanks and farewell to Representative Betty Cato, who has served her district so ably for so many years. We wish Betty well as we simultaneously welcome her replacement, Representative Jean Cabina. Taking my cue from the TV networks, I'd like to use part of the time I have with you tonight to review some of the events of the past 10 years on the theory that it's hard to tell where you are if you don't know where you've been. In January 1980, oil prices stood at $34.90. The pipeline construction was finished. The men and women in the Alaska workforce were understandably concerned over what they were going to do next. As it turned out, the answer was within easy reach. The state put up the money to build things, either directly through appropriations and grants or indirectly through loans subsidized or guaranteed by the Alaska Housing Finance Corporation or the Alaska Industrial Development Authority. At the same time, the oil industry was shifting into a production mode, which also led to a lot of construction jobs. When the first crews began to clear the pipeline right-of-way in the 70s, Housing was already tight in Alaska. During the construction boom of the early 80s, people came to Alaska faster than homes could be built. This surge in demand raised the value of all the real estate in the rail belt area and sometimes in other places. High interest costs drove up monthly payments to unprecedented levels, but people kept buying. In 1986, supply overtook demand in a number of ways in Alaska. Oil prices fell. You'll remember that. The construction stopped because the state no longer had the money and because oil field activity was effectively paralyzed by low prices. Large numbers of construction workers were seen to depart quickly to Arizona and Florida. Many of them left empty houses and empty condos. Real estate prices fell as dramatically as they had risen. Even today, many Alaskans owe more than their homes are worth. The precipitate decline in property values doomed a number of Alaska banks, which had lent heavily on real estate development. A lot of people lost their jobs. In the first quarter of 1987, the unemployment rate in Alaska was 12.9%, higher than at any time in recent history. For many Alaskans, things were not looking all that great in early 1987. Several thousand people left Alaska from 1986 to 1988, but those who stayed were committed to making things better. From the ashes of the artificial government-induced economy of the early 80s, a new Alaska is rising, stronger, more diversified, more certain of our rightful place in the world. The steady improvement of the Alaskan economy since 1987 may not be as exciting as a boom, but it's a lot more solid. The Department of Labor recently announced Alaska's November unemployment figures, and they were the lowest for that month since 1976. The help wanted sections of the newspapers are full of job opportunities. In some areas of the state, there's now a labor shortage. In Valdez last summer, I saw a bumper sticker that said, Captain Hazelwood created more jobs in 3 minutes than Cooper has in 3 years. That may be true, but it also appears from unemployment insurance statistics that most of the Alaskans who worked on the oil spill were absorbed into the labor market within 30 days. Where were all these people working? They're working in the seafood processing plants. They're working in the mines. They're working on the bases. They're working at the sawmills. They're working on the docks and at the airports. They're working in retail trades. And yes, they're working in the oil fields, where a new contract was recently signed to utilize union labor. A lot of the new jobs are in industries with foreign markets. Up until very recently, international trade in Alaska was mostly restricted to a few large companies, often from out of the state. Prominent citizens flew off on well-publicized trade missions from time to time, but for the average Alaskan, international trade did not exist. Times have changed. An increasing number of small to medium-sized businesses are selling products and commodities in the Asian markets, resulting incidentally in a new emphasis on quality. The dollar volume of international trade has more than doubled in the last 3 years and shows very few signs of slowing down. According to a U.S. Department of Commerce formula, 8,000 Alaskan jobs are created for every $1 billion in exports. If you use that formula, the number of jobs attributable to foreign trade in Alaska is 20,000 and growing fast. Many of our trade ventures have been helped through the University of Alaska, the Office of International Trade, and other public agencies. This constructive public-private partnership is also evident in the decision by Federal Express to move its international cargo hub to Anchorage. Geography has its own logic, but promotion always helps. Now that the Federal Express terminal is in operation, we're seeing the first wave of many subsidiary businesses, freight forwarders, parts banks, warehousing. As a side benefit, Alaskan entrepreneurs can reach Asian and European markets easier and quicker. Besides international trade and cargo, there's a new resurgence in the mining industry in Alaska. The two world-class mines at Red Dog and Greens Creek will be followed by others. Last month, the U.S. Department of Energy awarded the Alaska Industrial Development and Export Authority $93 million for a clean coal demonstration project at Healy. If successful, this project could be the catalyst for a massive increase in the sale of clean Alaska coal to Asian nations. As Alaskan jobs increase, the value of real property in the rail belt will increase as well. The real solution to vacancies in residential housing is more people. In that respect, some recent figures provide reason for optimism. During calendar year 1989, Anchorage gained at least 3,000 in population. While 3,000 people may not sound like a lot, it does represent almost 1.5% of the total population of Anchorage, and it does represent a clear change in the trends that had predominated for the 2 years before that. These events are not random. Collectively, they represent a growing confidence in the new Alaska. Many of the new economic ventures were launched through cooperative efforts of both the private and the public sectors. All of them depend on the workings of the global marketplace. As full participants in the global economy, we're beginning to get the attention we deserve, as evidenced by the November visit of Korean President No Tae-woo to Anchorage. We hope President No's interest will help put an Alaska natural gas pipeline in place within the next decade. As our economic prospects improve, we have not neglected our opportunities to contribute to world stability. The friendship flight to the Soviet Union in June 1988 unleashed a flood of visitors back and forth across the Bering Sea. Many of our various Alaskan initiatives in the Soviet Far East were started by private citizens. To help with this process, I am submitting to you legislation which would create the Alaska Soviet Far East Commission. The Commission will provide up-to-date information, coordinate visits back and forth, and assist when necessary with funding for our Soviet guests. What will we get out of this growing friendship with the Soviets? Well, the enthusiasm of individual Alaskans in melting the ice curtain suggests that we are really more interested in what we contribute than what we get, and that's a good sign. Most of us believe that we are doing something of historic importance, and we are. The Soviets are a people who have no tradition of democratic government or of free markets. If we can help them make this transition, we will make our world better. In September of this year, Alaska will once again play a leading role in world affairs when we host a Northern Regions Conference in Anchorage. Every northern nation will participate: Canada, the Soviet Union, Japan, Korea, China, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, Finland, Greenland, and Iceland. That's all of them, in case you were wondering. The conference will address opportunities and problems that our regions share and will seek to establish a common agenda for all northern nations. Once again, Alaska's leadership will pay dividends for us in the future by drawing attention to Alaska as a logical place for international meetings, but more importantly, by making friends who can help us in a variety of ways later on. Of course, not everything is coming up roses. Last Thursday, the Alaska Oil Spill Commission issued its report to the people. Its conclusions were sobering. Among other things, the Commission found oil spill response capability in the United States as well as Alaska to be primitive. That's the word they used. The report concluded that the best way to handle a major oil spill is to make sure it never happens in the first place. Well, thousands of Alaskans would certainly agree with that conclusion. Almost 10 months after the Exxon Valdez fetched up on Bly Island, on Bly Reef, the results are not yet in. We still don't know the extent to which our marine environment has been damaged. We still don't know when the toxicity hidden under the beaches will surface. We still don't know if the juvenile salmon that started their life cycles in Prince William Sound last spring will survive. But all of us do know that we share a determination to do what is necessary to assure that such an event will never again happen in Alaskan waters. The Commission made a number of specific recommendations. For the moment, acting on those recommendations should await final congressional approval of the oil spill legislation now pending in Washington, which is supposed to take place by the end of this month. One thing seems clear, though. The Congress intends to allow coastal states the right to impose tanker safety standards on ships operating in state waters. If so, we need to take action to impose those standards in a way that protects us from the risks of another spill like the one from the Exxon Valdez. While I'm on the subject, I want to take the opportunity once again to commend the people who worked to clean up the spill, and to those who contributed equipment or technology or boats or even advice. The Exxon Valdez may have an important symbolic meaning to people all over the world, but it has a real and quantifiable meaning to us. The oil will be in the substrate long after the last grandiose philosophical statement about the spill has been uttered and forgotten. In the meantime, those who were damaged must be fairly compensated. Further biological destruction must be prevented if possible. In the wake of the Exxon Valdez, we still have many questions to answer and much work to do. Next, I would like to address the subject of education. To most people in Alaska, it has become increasingly clear that our continued progress depends on the quality of the state's educational system. The trends in the Alaskan job market are away from unskilled labor and towards jobs requiring a high level of technical ability. Miners, seafood processors, and oil field workers will need intensive and ongoing technical training to keep up with the constantly improving technology which allows Alaskan industries to be competitive. Our ability to compete will depend on our educational standards. This means that our educational system has to be strengthened. While many Alaskan school districts are today delivering high-quality education to students, other districts are not keeping pace. The real key to educational excellence is in parental and community involvement and in understanding that today our schools are being asked to shoulder burdens which were regarded as family responsibilities just 20 or 30 years ago. But while there is an unmistakable trend towards increasing the role of the public schools in Alaskan society, in the intermediate future, there is a clear and present danger that funding for public education will not be adequate at the very time when we most urgently need it. As the volume of oil from the North Slope continues to decline, we need to make certain that the next generation of Alaskans is not left holding the bag. One way of doing that is through public approval of the Education Amendment, which would create a savings account for education within the permanent fund. By the year 2010, that savings account would generate enough interest to pay for the state's share of public education. The Education Amendment does not solve or even address the issue of educational quality. It does not displace the need for municipal contributions to education. It does not do everything for everybody. What it does do is to assure a source of funding for the Alaska public schools at a time when we are certain to need it. At the moment, some Alaskans are ambivalent about the Education Amendment. For those who believe that the income of the permanent fund should never be used for anything but dividends, or for those who believe that citizenship confers only rights and not obligations, I offer no rebuttal, except for the observation that those with different views should be allowed to express them at the ballot box. But I am confident that as the facts about the Education Amendment become generally known, public support for this important proposal will be reflected in passage of the amendment by the full legislature. If the requisite public support is lacking, then no doubt your actions will reflect that as well. But the Education Amendment is a rare chance to pass along the benefits of Prudhoe Bay to those who follow us. There's so much to gain and so little to lose. In this session of the legislature, we will also be visited by two old friends, subsistence and local hire. Both laws were struck down by the Alaska Supreme Court in late December. In each instance, the court recognized that establishing a subsistence preference for fish and game and providing for a local hire preference for jobs in Alaska during hard economic times are legitimate objectives. But both laws, which were enacted in 1986, went about those legitimate objectives in the wrong way. Now we have to try again. In a way, it's too bad we can't just walk across the street and negotiate a constitutional bill with the Supreme Court, but that isn't the way things are done. So I invite you instead to focus your attention on these two pieces of unfinished business. We have obtained a stay order from the court in the subsistence case so that we have until July to draft appropriate legislation. I trust you will not take that long. The people of Alaska approved of subsistence in 1982, and I believe we can work together to draft a bill which achieves its purpose and which is consistent with our Constitution. So we have major tasks ahead of us, as we always do. Unexpected events may propel us into action on other fronts as well. But by and large, Alaska is moving in the right direction. For us, the best times are yet to come. I look forward to working with you to fulfill our mission and our destiny. Thank you.
That brings us to the conclusion of Governor Steve Cooper's probable final State of the State address to a joint session of the Alaska Legislature, given into a packed house here in the House chambers here in Juneau. Governor Cooper now leaving the chambers after delivering his address in just under half an hour. which began with a capsule summary of some of the events of the decade of the 1980s, which he has ushered out as governor. And Peter, we heard about the educational endowment, we heard about the oil spill, some other historical facts. Any surprises for you?
Well, I was a little surprised at how few issues he really got into, and it shows that he really is, as he promised, focused on the education endowment, and he really is not about to let a lot of other things clutter it up and get in the way. The one bill he said he was introducing, he is introducing several, but the only one he mentioned was the Soviet Far East Commission, Alaska Soviet Far East Commission, that will help people get back and forth in the thawing of the ice curtain.
That's right. He mentioned more generally the oil spill commission report and had mentioned that the state's response had been characterized as primitive, but that the state will do what is necessary to see that it doesn't happen again. However, we don't have any specific legislation to go with that yet.
Yes, he did send one signal there. He said that Congress does intend to allow states the right to impose tanker safety standards. That's not final yet. The bill is still in conference committee. But if that comes out the way it's written now, the Oil Spill Commission and the governor now are saying that we should go back to some of those tough laws that were struck down in the late 70s. Things like double hulls, things like lateral thrusters, a lot of the tanker safety things that were hallmarks of Alaska when it used to be aggressive in terms of oil transportation safety.
A lot of the pre-session discussion, Peter, has focused on the fact that the main goal for Cooper is the education endowment and what he will have to do to get that, what he might have to trade. Any idea yet from your sense in the legislature?
The Senate is not going to say yet. I mean, that would be foolish. They don't want to give away their position now. They may have some private conversations with the governor, but they won't say what they want at this point. Things that have been mentioned are like a veto-proof capital budget. That's an obvious thing that everybody would think of, and I think that really remains to be seen. But what Cooper did say about the education endowment is that he's pinning his hopes on public support. If he can get enough public support for this, he thinks it'll get through the Senate. If not, he says the Senate probably doesn't even have to act on it.
All right. Thank you, Peter Kenyon of Alaska Public Radio Network. A reminder to viewers and listeners around the state, we will be broadcasting Governor Cooper's State of the Budget Address, where he will lay out his financial plan for the coming session. That will be this Thursday night at 7 o'clock on these same stations. For KTOO TV in Juneau and APRN with Peter Kenyon, I'm Janine Pohl. The preceding broadcast has been a special presentation of the public radio and television stations of Alaska.